Hello and welcome to another The eBiology Teacher Podcast. I'm Mr. Doc, and today we're talking about the digestive system. Yes, indeed. We're going to be talking a lot about the gastrointestinal tract. And if you've watched any of the other podcasts, we started with the respiratory system when we followed the air. And then we did the circulatory system, we followed the blood. Today, we're going to follow the food. All right? So let's take a look at what we are going to be looking at. All right. Our objectives today are first to describe the process of digestion and absorption of nutrients. We're going to trace a particle of food through the digestive system, as I've already alluded to, but we're also going to describe the function of each major organ along the way. We're going to talk about surface area and how it relates to the digestive process, and we're also going to talk about some of the chemical processes and the chemical things like enzymes and acids that are involved in the digestive process. All right, so let's go ahead and move forward. The digestive system, first of all, needs to be understood because of the fact that all organisms need energy for survival. That's metabolism. We've talked about that before. But the digestive system is the system that helps us get the energy that we need. So obviously it's an essential system. Most of our nutrients come from lipids or proteins or carbohydrates or other vitamins or minerals or whatever. Our digestive system's job is to break these down into their smaller parts so that they can be absorbed and used by the body. Now, the way I like to think about digestion is that if we look at like maybe a system of Legos, right? When we eat food, it's like eating the whole pirate ship that you built out of Legos. Our digestive system's job is to disassemble all the Legos into their little parts and deliver those little parts to the bloodstream. Now, those little parts in the bloodstream will go to the parts of the body that need them, and then they'll build something else out of them, a rocket ship or a big wall, which is all I could ever build with Legos. But that's the whole point, is we take those things that are built into this really intricate thing, and our digestive system breaks them down into individual bricks, and those bricks are delivered to our body so that our body can use them effectively. Now, digestion occurs in two major ways. The first is physical digestion. That is the breaking down of large pieces of food through ripping, tearing, crushing, or other physical processes like grinding. And we end up with smaller pieces. Now, the benefit to physical digestion is that we end up with an increased surface area. If I were to take a piece of paper, okay, and I were to physically digest it, I have a whole piece of paper here. Physical digestion would be simply breaking it into smaller parts. I'm not changing chemically what the paper really is. What I am doing is cutting it into smaller pieces. Now, the nice part about this is I have more surface area. Surface area is the amount of area that's exposed to the surface. Now, if you look, all of this area along the tear is exposed now. It wasn't before. So all these little pieces provide us with a lot more surface area. And that's what physical digestion does. The nice part about that is it makes chemical digestion a lot more effective. Well, what's chemical digestion? Well, easy. Chemical digestion is the changing of the chemical structure of something through some sort of chemical process. Now, that involves changing chemical bonds. That means breaking things down into smaller parts and breaking the bonds that hold them together. The reason why having increased surface area for chemical digestion is simple. It gives you more space for the chemical elements to work on. All right? Now, what is an example of a chemical digestion? Well, simple. That is chemical digestion. See, even though this paper seemed just paper, I've chemically changed it now. There's something different about it. I haven't just broken it into parts. I've chemically digested it into something completely different. Sorry, the smoke. Burn down the building. Anyway, so that's the difference in chemical digestion and physical digestion. Physical digestion, this is still paper, right? It's still paper. It's still got the same chemical properties of paper. It's just in smaller pieces. This is no longer paper, okay? That is something completely chemically different than what we started with. And that is all the difference. All right? So let's move on to the gastrointestinal tract. Now, unlike the other systems that we've already talked about, the gastrointestinal tract, or the digestive system in general, goes on a track system. The lungs go on an open circuit. What do we mean by open circuit? Well, we mean the air comes in, it goes to the lungs, and it comes back out. Air comes in, goes to the lungs, comes back out. The circulatory system is a closed circuit. Blood goes to the heart, lungs back to the heart, the body back to the heart. Lungs back to the heart, body back to the heart, lungs back. That's a closed circuit. The digestive tract, or the gastrointestinal tract, gastro meaning stomach, intestinal meaning intestine, is a tract. It has a start point and an end point. And that means that the food is going to travel along it. It's going to enter in one place and exit out another, if you know what I mean. So, along the tract, there are several features that make it good for digestion. First of all, there are things that produce enzymes and acids that help do chemical digestion, but there are also things that do mechanical or physical digestion. The other thing we need to note, and we just mentioned it earlier, is that surface area drastically increases the amount of space where absorption can occur. So increased surface area is not only good when we're dealing with the food itself, but also in the tract. And we'll get to that more specifically in a minute. So let's follow the food. If we start in the food, the mouth, specifically the teeth, do physical digestion. Now, if you look on the inside of your mouth, oh, my teeth look yellow on the camera. It's like dentist. If you look in here, it's like a veritable set of chef knives in there. You've got pointy ones, you got long cleaver ones, you got little bitty blades, sharp blades, grinding blades. That's because our teeth do all kinds of stuff with food. They rip, they tear, they grind, they crush, they do all that kind of stuff. And that's why our teeth are there. That's why we have different kinds of teeth, so we can eat different kinds of food, and so that we can further process a piece of food. So we can rip it apart, and then we can shred it, then we can tear the shreds, and then we can grind the shreds into little pieces and then swallow, right? The mouth also contains several glands, 3 in particular, that are salivary glands. Salivary glands produce saliva, which is a mucus that contains certain enzymes like amylase. Amylase starts chemical digestion with respect to carbohydrates. Now, saliva does another job. Saliva also aids in lubrication for when we swallow, and we'll get to why that's important in a minute. You'll see the names parotid, sublingual, and submandibular. Those names, 2 of those names actually tell you where they are. Your mandible is your jawbone, so we're going to have 2 right under our jawbone. We're going to have sublingual, which is under your tongue, right, and the parotid is going to be in the back. You've probably felt this before if you've eaten something really sour or you've eaten something really, really sweet, and you kind of get that sort of twinge. You're feeling that in your salivary glands, and sometimes it's not very comfortable, especially if you eat something really sour. You're like, ow, it hurts. Oh, sorry. Okay, so the salivary glands produce the enzyme amylase along with saliva. The saliva acts as a lubricant for when we swallow, because food is going to travel down the esophagus. Now, if you recall, the trachea was like an open tube, but the esophagus isn't. The esophagus is a muscular tube, and if you think about it, if you tried to push food down a muscular tube, it's just going to sit there. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to squeeze. And that squeezing muscular motion is called peristalsis. Peristalsis is a series of muscular contractions which act to squeeze the food in a particular direction. Now, the squeezing not only moves the food, but it also adds an element of physical digestion. The esophagus is going to lead to the stomach, and the stomach is going to churn and produce enzymes and acids which conduct chemical digestion. So the stomach is both a physical and a chemical digestion organ. Now, peristalsis is one of those things that not a lot of people understand, and it's actually pretty simple. The best analogy I can come up with is squeezing a tube of toothpaste. All right? If you squeeze the tube of toothpaste, toothpaste comes out, but it can also go that way too. Eventually, you got to squeeze from the end and get it all to go forward. But that's kind of how the muscle contractions happen. They're kind of squeezing the food down, and if there's some up here, we'll squeeze it back down again. Oh, go back out. It's kind of this milking sort of motion that goes and squeezes the food down. That's how peristalsis works. Your stomach also uses, as a matter of fact, the whole gastrointestinal tract uses peristalsis to move the food along. Your stomach is like a peristalsis machine, man. The stomach has 3 layers of muscle. One runs longitudinal, one runs latitudinal, and one runs diagonal. So the stomach can contract in any direction, and it's like a human blender, man. It just keeps going and squeezing and squeezing and squeezing, along with the fact that there are enzymes and there's acids and there's saliva in there, and it's just going nuts until we get this really creamy, thick liquid of acid, enzyme, and broken down food. All right. Now, there's a couple things you might want to think about, or are a couple things you might want to think about. Me fail English? That's impossible. I'm sorry. Think about this. The stomach, which is located right here, so we've got the mouth, esophagus, stomach. The stomach has acids and enzymes and all kinds of stuff in there. So the question is, why doesn't the acid burn through the stomach? Well, that's because the stomach has a special lining that prevents the acid from eating through the stomach. If that lining is compromised, then the acid actually can affect the stomach, in which case we end up with an ulcer, right? Another thing that you probably heard of is acid reflux disease and heartburn, okay? Well, acid reflux disease has to do when the stomach acids go so far up the stomach that they actually enter into the esophagus and they reflux. They come up into the esophagus. Well, that can lead to a situation called heartburn. And we know now that the heart and the stomach aren't directly connected, so that can't be it. What's happening is, if you look at the diagram here, the stomach and the esophagus meet right around here. Well, the heart's like right here, right? So what we need to be careful of, or what we need to understand, is that if acid is rolling up into the esophagus and the heart is here, that burning sensation of the acid in the esophagus is going to feel like it's right here in my heart, right? That's heartburn, okay? The other thing is that there's a sphincter muscle right at the top of the stomach. Yes, I said sphincter. A sphincter is any muscle that constricts like a circle, right? Anything. So there's a little circular muscle right here that keeps the esophagus closed to keep acid from coming up into it. If something passes it, it's called the cardiac sphincter, then it's going to enter in the esophagus, we're going to get burned. Okay, and the reason it's called the cardiac sphincter is because it's really near where the heart is. All right, so that's, now you got to get an idea of why we call things the way we call them. All right, so once the stomach is done, it produces a substance called chyme, and chyme is now passed into the small intestine. All right. Small intestine is broken down into 3 parts. The duodenum in the human is about 25 centimeters, the jejunum, which is about 8 feet, and the ileum, which is about 13 feet, for a total of 21 feet. Now, I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound very small. Okay, the small intestine is actually longer than the large intestine. So why do we call it the small intestine? It has to do with the diameter. The diameter of the small intestine is actually relatively small compared to the large intestine, which is relatively big. So that's where they get their name. The large intestine is much, much shorter, but much wider in diameter. The small intestine is much, much longer, but smaller in diameter. Now, the duodenum, 25 centimeters, jejunum, 8 feet, and the ileum about 13 feet. Those different places are responsible for different things. Primarily, the duodenum is the place where all the accessory organs put their secretions into the digestive tract. You see, when we talk about the digestive system, there are organs that food doesn't travel through, but they do play a role. For example, food does not travel through the liver, food doesn't travel through the pancreas, through the gallbladder, or the spleen, okay? However, as a matter of fact, the spleen isn't really a digestive organ, but the organs, liver, gallbladder, pancreas, they all play a role, and all 3 of those secrete a substance that we use in chemical digestion. All 3 of those have ducts that run from those organs to the small intestine at the duodenum. So that's why the duodenum is a special section, because it's the part of the small intestine where all the other things have ducts. That's ducts, not ducks, right? That run into the system. Here, I got little ducks running around. Anyway, now, if we look here, we're going to talk about the pancreas and liver and the gallbladder here in a little bit, but a little bit more about the small intestine. Their job is absorption of nutrients, and the way they do that is the interior walls of the small intestine are covered with these finger-like projections called villi, and the villi increase surface area drastically. Now, I want you to imagine this. what is the surface area of my hand? Well, it's this right here, right? So let's imagine that. Now what's the surface area? Well, it's all of this, right? So if I were trying to absorb something, and this is all the surface area that I had, I could absorb stuff, but I could absorb way more stuff if it was like this, because I could absorb here, 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 everywhere, right? And that is why absorption and surface area are really related. So there's all these finger-like projections. Well, what difference does that make in the total surface area of the overall intestine? Well, we already said that the small intestine is about 21 feet long. What really is impressive is that the inner surface area is approximately 2,700 square feet. That should say square feet, by the way. That's huge. That is huge. Keep in mind, the average house is 1,500 square feet. That's tiny compared to the inner. You could carpet your entire house, in some cases twice over, with the inner lining of your small intestines. I just grossed myself out a little bit. Is that plush or Berber carpet? No, that's small intestine carpet. Isn't that funny? No, it's not funny at all. All right, here we go. Sorry. Inside the villi, and this is really important, are these little capillaries. And what we already know about capillaries is they're actually pretty good at absorbing nutrients. Okay? They're really good at absorbing nutrients, and that's what happens. The capillaries run through the villi absorb the nutrients get into the capillaries, and Bob's your uncle, Sally's your aunt. Nutrients are in the bloodstream. Now, what happens next? Well, not everything gets absorbed, thank goodness. There's some things that are going to make it through that we do not need, and that is where we start to form waste. All right? Once absorption in the small intestine occurs, peristalsis will move all of that waste into the large intestine, which is also called the colon. Now, in humans, and this is different in the fetal pig, which we'll see when we do that dissection, humans have the ascending colon, the transverse colon, the descending colon, and what we call the sigmoid colon, which is kind of an S-shaped. The colon's job really is to reclaim the water that's still in the waste. Now, our body can use water and, in fact, needs it, which is why when you get diarrhea, your body is getting a lot of water, and everybody says, well, make sure you drink a lot of water. Well, you're getting some good advice there, because when you have diarrhea, your colon isn't absorbing all the water, which means you're losing it every time you go to the restroom, and that means you really need to be replenishing that as often as possible. Now, the large intestine removes the water, and the waste that is not absorbed becomes more solid, more dense as it goes to the colon, and ultimately is formed into feces. Now, the feces is held at the very end of the colon in a structure called the rectum. So the rectum is sort of a holding tank for that solid waste. The rectum is terminated by a round muscle called the anal sphincter. Now, the anal sphincter stays contracted all the time until it is relaxed. And when the anal sphincter is relaxed, the waste is allowed to leave the body through an opening called the anus. All right? And a little misnomer correction here. The anus is actually the external, inferior-most opening of the digestive tract. The inferior, external opening of the digestive tract. The rectum is actually the area in which waste is held until it can be gotten rid of. Now, I promised you that I would tell you a little bit more about other organs of the digestive system, and I shall keep my promise now. The liver has a duct that runs into the duodenum of the small intestine, and the liver produces a substance called bile. Now, the liver does a lot of things, but right now, in terms of digestion, this is what we're going to concentrate on. The liver produces a substance called bile, and bile helps break down fat globules, so the fat globules can be further digested and absorbed. The gallbladder secretes a very, very concentrated version of bile, and the gallbladder kind of goes into action when we have a fatty meal. So if we were to go to some place like Five Guys, I don't know if you have Five Guys before, but really greasy, really good, but really, really greasy. Your gallbladder is going to start secreting that extra concentrated bile, because what it does, it takes bile from the liver, removes the water, and it's really concentrated, and it breaks down all that fat. Now, you've probably heard of somebody having their gallbladder removed, and it's certainly fine. You can remove the gallbladder. It's no big deal. However, when you do remove the gallbladder, you do have to change your diet permanently because you can't have those excessively fatty foods, because if you did, your body wouldn't be able to handle it. So if you do have to have your gallbladder removed, you're going to have to change your diet, and hopefully none of you have to have your gallbladder removed. All right. Finally, the pancreas produces a substance called sodium bicarbonate. Wait a minute. I've heard of sodium bicarbonate before. All right, that's baking soda, right? Sodium bicarbonate is a neutralizer. Remember how we've said all along, all biological processes have an optimal temperature and pH. Well, digestion needs to happen at a higher pH, okay? Well, how do those enzymes work in the stomach? Well, those enzymes work at a higher pH, okay? Those enzymes in the stomach work at a higher pH. Absorption, however, needs to happen at a relatively neutral pH. So sodium bicarbonate is secreted from the pancreas into the duodenum to neutralize the chyme, so the chyme is more neutral and therefore can be absorbed more efficiently. Okay, so the enzymes in the stomach are fine. They love acidic environments. As a matter of fact, they work better in an acidic environment than they do in a neutral environment. But absorption needs to happen at a more neutral pH, so that means that we need some sodium bicarbonate. The other thing you've probably heard about the pancreas is it is involved in insulin production. Insulin production or insulin regulation is done by the pancreas, which has to do with the concentration of blood sugar. Let's go ahead and wrap it up and talk about what we've learned. First of all, the process of digestion is the breaking down of substances either through physical or chemical means so that they can be absorbed. Absorbed is taking those nutrients from the digestive tract and putting them into the bloodstream where they can be used. To trace a particle down the food or down the digestive system, we're going to start in the mouth where chemical and physical digestion is occurring. The enzyme in saliva is chemical digestion. The teeth are doing physical digestion. We swallow the food. The saliva lubricates it so that it goes down the esophagus. Peristaltic motion pushes it down the esophagus. Peristalsis, that squeezing, also results in some physical digestion. Once it gets to the stomach acids and enzymes do chemical digestion, and the churning of the stomach does physical digestion and turns the food, acids, gastric juices, enzymes, into a substance called chyme. Chyme is put into the small intestine at the duodenum. The duodenum takes in bile to break down the fat globules and takes in sodium bicarbonate from the pancreas to neutralize the chyme. And then the chyme goes from the duodenum to the jejunum and the ileum, all part of the small intestine. And then from there, they go to the large intestine. And by the way, we did skip an organ, the appendix. People always talk about that's a little sac at the end of the small intestine and right at the beginning of the large intestine. So if that gets inflamed, we can take that out. It's really not a necessity organ, so that's one of those things that can be taken out. And then from the large intestine, in humans, it'll go up the ascending colon, across the transverse colon, down the descending colon, into the sigmoid colon and away at the rectum until the anal sphincter relaxes and excretes the waste out of the anus. If we look at surface area, remember we said that the smaller the surface area of the food, the more space there is for enzymes and acids to act on it. The more surface area there is in the digestive tract, the more area there is for absorption, which means the likelihood of getting more nutrients out of the food. So that's surface area. And finally, the role of enzymes in the digestive process is that enzymes, as we've already noted, help break things down in the digestive system. Each enzyme is specific to a different type of particle, which means we have thousands of different enzymes in our body and in our digestive system, each designed for a different thing. Hopefully you have been able to get something out of this lecture and that it clarifies you and you now consider yourself an expert on the ways of digestion. And if you want more information, feel free to ask, email, call, or whatever, or look it up on the internet, because that's why it's there. All right, I'll see you next time when we do the fetal pig dissection of the digestive system. Until then, I will see you later.